first science, and 2,000 and more years later, not yet matured to an actual science, still in the form of an art in some ways. Now, as this century comes to a close, as we get closer, so it's 450, 440, 430, 420, 410, and as it draws to a close, quote, "By the close of the 5th century, long somber shadows were falling across its sunlit glow." So even past the year 400 is beyond the height, orgiastic height of the Golden Age. But the 300s, I remind you, is the period when Aristotle and Plato walked around. So now we go to the rise of the Persian Empire. And we've already learned quite a bit about Persia, so we're not actually going to get much here. But remember, I said that we were going to forestall a little information on the Persians because the Persians and the Greeks are so intertwined. So we're going to get some stuff that we haven't seen before. This is setting up the context again for the battle at Marathon. Rise of the Persian Empire. The Persians conquered the Near East from 560 to 486 BC. Skipped quite a ways. The Assyrian Empire had fallen in 612 to the Medians of Iran and the Chaldeans of Babylonia. Now both of them conquered the Assyrian Empire, and then there was a split after that. The Medians, later on the Greeks call the Persians the Medes, because Persia is the name for their whole empire. But the Medes came from that highland in from the sea up in the high mountains in modern-day Iran. So that's the Medes themselves ruled the Persian Empire. So the Greeks called them the Medes, but the Medes and the Chaldeans split Assyria in the early ages. Now Cyrus, from 559 to 530, gained the support of the warrior nobles in Iran and led them in a sudden outrush which created the Persian Empire. Big, just like Alexander the Great's, just like many other things have happened, just a bam like that, and the empire was created. It didn't last very long, though, did it? Not too long. Few conquests in history have been so swift. Media fell in 550, Lydia in 547, Babylon 539. Cyrus died in Central Asia defending his northeastern frontier from the Jaxartes River against the Massagetae nomads. Egypt, the last part of the Near East proper, fell to his son Cambyses in 525. Now the Persian Empire was quite a success, and to explain that he mentions there's two basic things. The growing cultural and economic unity of the Near East. The Assyrians had a pretty big empire. That collapsed, fell apart. So then the Persian is the next, and it was just more tolerant. So it was pretty easy to shift gears and go that way. So just growing cultural and economic unity. But also the ability of the Persian kings he mentions. This is a literate society with a long tradition of learning behind it, and they weren't the best kings ever, but they had quite a bit of ability. They set up pretty big systems of administration and so on. The organization of the Persian Empire, down here a bit, we're going to skip over it, but some interesting things they did in there. After the suicide of Cambyses, who seemed to have become mentally deranged, a bloody civil war broke out in 522. The victor was a collateral member of the Achaemenid royal house, Darius. So Darius wins the civil war, becomes king of Persia in 521. He reigns until 486. In his long reign, the Persian realm was extended to the fringe of the Indus River on the east and into Europe on the west. Remember the top of the alligator jaw that goes over top of where Greece itself is. Clear up into Macedonia up there. More important yet, Darius organized the Persian Empire along lines which it was to follow down to 330 BC, when the last Persian king fell before Alexander of Macedonia. Now it talks about the organization. The empire itself was divided into tributary kingdoms and great provinces called satrapies, from the Median word satrap, or governor. Under Darius, each of the 20 satrapies at that time was required to yield specific quantities of tax in money, horses, and other items, and provided contingents of ships or soldiers to the Persian navy and army. The satraps were virtually local kings who often inherited their position and had wide powers in local government and foreign affairs, but they were checked by royally appointed secretaries, garrison commanders, and traveling inspectors called the king's eyes and ears. I can only imagine the opportunities for corruption, but perhaps the king sent out multiple eyes and ears who didn't know about each other. That would be one way to keep things in check. Roads radiating from the central capital of Susa, along with Ecbatana and Babylon, were much improved and carried to the imperial post. The most famous of these roads was the Royal Road from Ephesus on the Aegean coast to Susa, 3 months long, which was much traveled over by the centuries by Greek ambassadors, traders, learned men, and captives of war. Now they took over one Greek city-state and all of the people resettled at the mouth of the Tigris River. A long tradition of taking whole populations and moving them. This road was like the central artery of the Persian Empire. On the whole, it may be doubted that the Persian Empire was more efficiently organized than the Assyrian state had been, or that the Persian army was more effective. But they were able to maintain general control over the largest state yet created in the Near East. Much of the area had been broken to the yoke by the Assyrian imperialists, and the fact that Persian rule was of a more easygoing nature perhaps promoted loyalty. Local styles of government and local customs were generally tolerated, as among the Jews, who created a temple state around Jerusalem. Economically, the more advanced parts of the empire do not seem to have progressed markedly, but they had the benefit of peace, good communications, and a stable coinage of gold derricks and silver shekels, which served as a medium of exchange, especially for the Greek subjects and for mercenaries. Why would their coinage serve as a medium of exchange, especially for Greek subjects? Because the Greeks are more educated, more productive, and are more able to use a monetary economy. Now we skip a bit. The Persian culture, just a bit about this. The most valuable contributions of the Persians to the Near East were political unification and military defense against the nomads of Central Asia. Culturally, the Persians were far less civilized than most of their subjects of the Fertile Crescent, and they showed originality only in the field of religion. Now, this is pre-Ionian Greek philosophy, so we have to say that if they showed some originality in their religious thought, didn't they show, therefore, some originality in philosophy? Because philosophy was the ancient form of religion. It was the birth of philosophy, was from religion. So I think we have to give them a point or two of credit for having some sort of an intellectual tradition, to have some originality in philosophy, in religion. At some uncertain date in the 6th century, the fiery reformer Zoroaster rose in eastern Iran to reject the purely ritual quality of contemporary worship, its magic, and the belief in many gods. Instead, he stressed an ethical faith centered about the god of light and truth, Ahura Mazda, who was opposed to the evil force Ahriman. That's like the god, the Platonic god of Christianity, and Satan. All men in this world must support the good by their deeds, or else serve the spirits of darkness. In the end would come a last judgment, which would send the good to heaven and the bad to hell. Zoroaster's powerful views became an enduring part of Iranian religion, although not to the exclusion of the main polytheistic tradition preserved by the Magi priests. Darius, above all other rules, adhered to Ahura Mazda. Apart from the Zoroastrian writings of the Avesta and the boastful inscriptions of the kings, the Persians seem to have had no literature. Their own language, for which they had constructed a simple cuneiform syllabary, began to yield, even for purposes of administration, to Aramaic. That was the language Jesus spoke, which became a common tongue across the lowlands of the Near East. In science, the main achievements of the era were due to Babylonian astronomers and mathematicians, who came to be able to predict lunar eclipses and perfected a place value notation. We've seen a bit about the lunar eclipses. Their knowledge was tapped both by the Greeks in the west and the Indians in the southeast. The arts in the Persian period derived from the many earlier cultures of the Near East and were marked by more magnificent